Mateo walked the scrubland near Doñana in 2002 counting rabbit burrows because without rabbits he knew what was coming for the lynx. The number everyone repeats is 94, but the real coordinated Spanish census that year counted fewer than 100 Iberian lynx left on the entire planet. By 2001, scientists had already logged only 62 mature individuals, the lowest point in the species' recorded history. Stick with this and you'll get the real disease that started the collapse, the 10 hidden causes nobody mentions, and the exact number scientists reach by 2025. The Iberian lynx isn't just any wildcat, it's a rabbit specialist, and rabbits made up the overwhelming majority of its diet across its entire range. That specialization is exactly what made Mateo's job so tense, because when rabbits disappeared, the lynx had nothing else to fall back on at scale. Here's the part the popular version gets wrong. People say Spain released a virus in the 1950s and single-handedly caused this crisis, but myxomatosis actually entered through France first, then spread into Spain and Portugal. In some regions it killed more than 90% of the rabbit population, and Mateo's own grandfather likely watched it happen in real time. Then, just as rabbits were recovering decades later, rabbit hemorrhagic disease reached Spain in the late 1980s and hit them all over again. Two separate disease collapses, decades apart, and Mateo's entire career sat in the shadow of both of them. But scientists have been clear that disease alone doesn't explain the whole story, and that's the piece most documentaries skip entirely. Habitat fragmentation cut lynx populations off from each other, roads killed them directly, illegal trapping killed more, and low genetic diversity made every remaining animal more fragile. One major study found that many lynx subpopulations had already vanished before some of the disease outbreaks even hit, proving this was never a single-cause extinction. By the early 2000s, only two real strongholds remained, one around Doñana, where Mateo worked, and one near Sierra de Andújar. Two isolated populations sounds like a number, but here's what it actually meant on the ground. If disease hit one bad season, or a handful of females died, the entire population could vanish before anyone even reacted. So conservationists didn't try one fix. They ran 10 at once, protecting habitat, boosting rabbits, breeding lynx in captivity, and building corridors between fragments. Captive breeding wasn't just put two lynx in a pen. Every pairing was tracked for ancestry, because breeding the wrong two animals could quietly shrink genetic diversity even further. Since 2010, more than 400 captive-bred Iberian lynx have been released back into parts of Spain and Portugal. And this next number is the one that actually explains the recovery. In 2005, the species occupied only 449 square kilometers of Spain. By the 2024 assessment, that range had expanded to at least 3,320 square kilometers. Mateo's own patch of scrubland went from an isolated island to one node in a much bigger, reconnected network. That's the real lesson here. 2,000 lynx crammed into one valley is still fragile. 2,000 lynx spread across a reconnected landscape is a completely different species. Now, the actual numbers, because they're honestly staggering. The 2023 census counted 2,021 lynx total, 1,299 adults or subadults, and 722 cubs born that single year. The 2024 census jumped to 2,401 animals, a 19% increase in just 12 months, with 470 reproductive females driving the growth. The 2025 census reached 2,663 individuals, up another 10.9%, meaning the population had nearly doubled in only 4 years. Mateo went from counting burrows in despair to counting cubs every spring, 3 separate litters some seasons. In June 2024, the IUCN officially moved the Iberian lynx from endangered down to vulnerable on the red list. Here's my honest reaction to that. Vulnerable still sounds like a win, and it is, but it is not the word safe, and treating it that way would be a mistake. The IUCN's own green status assessment gave the species a recovery score of just 22%, meaning it's still considered largely depleted compared to full ecological health. Rabbit disease can still return, roads still kill lynx every year, illegal trapping hasn't disappeared, and genetic diversity remains a genuine long-term concern. Mateo still checks his rabbit traps for signs of disease every single season, because one bad outbreak could undo a decade of work. Here's the detail that changes how you should see this whole recovery. Scientists didn't just save a cat, they rebuilt rabbit populations, restored scrubland, created movement corridors, and reduced road deaths across an entire ecosystem. Every one of those interventions helps other species too, other predators, other scavengers, anything that depends on the same scrubland and the same rabbits. That makes the lynx what conservationists call a flagship species, protect it, and you accidentally protect dozens of species nobody's making documentaries about. Think about what that actually means for Mateo's daily walk through the scrub. The same corridors built for Lynx movement now carry foxes, genettes, and birds of prey between the same fragmented patches of land. None of that was the original goal, it was a side effect of trying to save one very picky cat. So don't take away from this that 94 animals is some magic number that guarantees a comeback. The real lesson is that a population can shrink to a shockingly small size and still be pulled back, but only if intervention starts before genetic and ecological collapse becomes irreversible. Mateo's generation had one job: keep enough rabbits alive long enough for the lynx to hang on. The next generation's job is different: keep the recovery from reversing the moment anyone stops paying attention. That's the uncomfortable part of every conservation success story. The moment people assume it's finished is usually the moment it starts sliding backward. 2,663 lynx sounds enormous next to 62, but compared to the species' historical range across the entire Iberian Peninsula, it's still a fraction of what once existed. Climate change adds a variable nobody fully controls. Shifting rainfall and rising temperatures could still reshape the scrubland Mateo has spent his life protecting. Domestic cat diseases are another quiet threat, spreading into wild populations through contact zones nobody planned for. None of that erases what's been achieved. Going from 62 mature lynx to over 1,700 in barely 2 decades is one of the fastest recoveries any wild cat has ever seen. It just means the story isn't over, and pretending it is would undo exactly the kind of vigilance that got the species this far. Mateo still remembers the exact year the census dipped below 100, and he still checks the new numbers every single spring. What he's watching for now isn't extinction anymore, it's whether the recovery holds once the emergency energy fades and funding gets harder to justify. That tension, between celebrating a win and refusing to relax, is honestly the most human part of this entire story. 94 wasn't a magic floor the species bounced off of, it was simply how close to zero a population can get, and still have enough left to rebuild from. Every number after that, the corridors, the captive breeding, the 400 reintroductions, was a deliberate choice, not luck. Mateo didn't save the species by himself, but people exactly like him, walking the same scrubland every season, are the reason there's a number to celebrate at all. If you want to see what happens when a similar recovery effort doesn't work out this well, the next video breaks down exactly where one went wrong. Watch that one next, because the difference between a comeback and a collapse usually comes down to just 1 or 2 decisions made early enough.